Good morning and welcome to another video. Welcome back to the channel and welcome to my garden. In today's video we've got something a little bit different for you. I'm going to show you how to capture images like these. So before we jump right into the video, I just want to say that the inspiration for this video came from a fellow YouTuber's video which was made probably 3 or 4 years ago now. A guy called Darren Knight from England who did a wildlife photography video in his backyard, and that was the inspiration for actually a lot of photographers to create similar videos. I've had several attempts at making this hummingbird video and eventually put one together and accidentally deleted it when I was uploading it. So I thought I'd take the chance again today and do the whole thing from scratch. So what I thought I'd do first is tell you about the 7 things you're going to need to photograph hummingbirds. And I'm sure the same principles could be applied to many garden birds. But today we're focusing on ruby-throated hummingbirds. Here in Atlantic Canada, ruby-throated hummingbirds visit every summer, usually arriving about the 10th, 11th of May is when we first start to see them in the garden. And they stay for quite a while, usually till sort of late August. There's still a few hanging around before they migrate south for the winter. Usually the males appear first, setting up their territory probably, and they are followed just a couple of weeks later by the females. Females tend to be most active around the feeders. Males tend to keep a bit of a low profile. But anyway, we'll jump right in and I'll show you the 7 things that I use to capture the images I just showed you. So the first thing you're going to need, stands to reason, hummingbirds. And we have no shortage of them here in the garden. Certainly helps when you have a garden full of flowers. Certainly helps to attract them. Second thing you're going to need is a hummingbird feeder. These are available everywhere. Your local stores, hardware stores, garden centres, Amazon. Really it makes no difference to which type of feeder you actually get. The hummingbirds really don't care if your feeder costs $5 or $105. Trust me, I know. This is an old one I've got here and it has perches. Some don't have perches. For the photography I tend to use feeders without a perch. That way I can actually get the birds hovering. I have been known to cut the little perches off of certain feeders. The feed you're going to put in here, you can buy pre-made stuff in the stores. There's a lot of controversy over that, saying that it can actually harm the birds. So we tend to make our own. Own mixture would be 4 parts water to 1 part sugar. And that usually gets changed every week. If the weather is extremely hot, we'll change it every couple of days just because it can sort of ferment in there and go bad. So really in really hot weather we're changing it every couple of days or once a week. The other thing that's really important is to keep your hummingbird feeders clean. So when you are changing the mixture, give them a good rinse out, take a brush, clean out the ports and stuff like that. You don't want any disease building up there that can harm the birds. So the third thing you're going to need is a camera where you can control the shutter speed. I use Fujifilm X-T30, which is not an expensive camera by any stretch of the imagination. I'm sure any camera would do, whether it's a mirrorless, DSLR, film camera, whatever, as long as you can control that shutter speed. Couple that with a telephoto lens. In this case I'm using the Fujinon 50-230. Again, not an expensive lens. I used to use the 55-200, but as you've probably seen in a previous video a couple of years ago, I smashed that lens and I'm using this much less expensive lens, but it still performs really well. It's a 50-230 Fujinon. Again, any telephoto lens will do. If you've got a 70-200, something like that, that would work fine. As for the fourth thing you're going to need, a good tripod, a good sturdy tripod. This is the iFootage TC7 carbon fibre. Really good tripod, and a couple of years ago I invested the money in getting a good solid tripod for landscape photography, that type of thing, and I really love this tripod. Again, any sturdy tripod will do. I have in the past used the tripod, which is a little travel tripod, the Benro Slim I believe it is, which is holding up the camera that you're on right now. So as for the fifth thing you're going to need to capture these fantastic hummingbird images, a cable release. This thing here is a Fujifilm RR100, which has worked well with the Fujifilm X-T30 in the past. It does have its restrictions obviously, because that's as far as I can move away from the camera. Your other option is a remote release like this. This little thing I got on Amazon for I think around about 30 bucks at the time. That was a couple of years ago. It's made by JJC, and I think they have models for various makes of cameras. It has channel selector and stuff there. And this will work from quite a distance away. I'll show you my exact technique and how I do that in just a few minutes. But basically I can set the camera up right next to the feeder and sit in the shade with a beer and fire off the shutter when the birds arrive. What could be more enjoyable? So as I mentioned, really important to keep the feeders clean and change the sugar mix often. Just made a fresh batch here, 1 part sugar, 4 parts water. You really don't need any more than that. That seems to be the recommended mixture that you'll find on most of the websites relating to hummingbirds. I'll just go hang this up. So right now in the garden I have 4 different feeders. I have these 2 here, another one over at the post there, and one actually attached to the kitchen window, which is pretty cool. You can watch them from the house when the weather's bad. This is the 2 that I tend to use for most of my photography, and what I'll do, I remove all the other feeders and only leave 1 feeder for the short time that I take pictures. I don't tend to take pictures in long spells because I don't want the birds to be without their mixture, so I'll maybe shoot for maybe half hour, 45 minutes, then put the other feeders back up, let them feed for a while, and then I'll go back to just 1 feeder. And my trick for focusing, guys, which is I've tried focus tracking, I've tried following them by hand. So what I tend to do is, the shed is right here. I sit in the shed with the door open on a chair, so only 6 feet away, something like that. Camera will be on a tripod where you are with a 50-230 lens, and for focusing what I'll do is I put a little piece of stick in here and I'll focus at various points along this piece of twig. The birds tend to, when they're feeding, they'll hover here, shoot in and come back to here. So I focus on the stick and set the camera to continuous fire mode. I shoot in JPEG as well, so I don't hit the buffer. I can fire off a whole bunch of images. I think something like, I want to say 12 frames a second with that camera when I shoot on JPEG, and that's how I capture the images. So guys, I did mention there was 7 tips. I've only covered 5. So number 6, you're going to need lots and lots of patience. You could be sitting around for quite some time. The birds have to feed every 15 minutes. That's their requirements. So you can kind of predict when they're going to be here, but you do need patience because sometimes they might not come to this feeder. They'll go to the other ones, or they'll go to flowers in the yard before they come here. So you do need a lot of patience. And as well as patience, the other thing you're going to need is a shitload of luck. And there's your 7 tips to capturing fantastic hummingbird images. So one other thing worth noting about doing this type of photography, guys, is shutter speed. Now you will see some images from other photographers where they freeze the motion of the hummingbird's wings and everything is absolutely pin sharp. That's not what I like. I like to portray the movement of the bird in the images. So my shutter speeds range, depending on the light and the conditions, anywhere from about 800th of a second up to 2000ths of a second. Still not enough to freeze the wings, but that's the way I like images. I like to portray that sense of motion in the image. But play around, guys, and experiment and give this type of photography a try. I'm sure you'll really enjoy it. As I mentioned at the start of the video, this video was inspired by Darren Knight. His backyard wildlife photography videos were absolutely amazing, and that's what inspired this video. This video has been probably about 3 or 4 years in the making, and I think I already mentioned I accidentally deleted the first version of it, so I had to do the whole thing from scratch. But I hope you enjoyed it. I also mentioned in the video that it helps if you have a yard full of flowers, and Lisa and I have created quite a lovely garden here. Lots of flowers, lots of annual flowers up here on the deck, lots of perennials and shrubs in the garden. So that really does provide ideal conditions for hummingbirds. It really attracts them. Also provides ideal conditions for other birds. We've got a couple of finch feeders in the garden, and since we added a couple of bird baths, we got all kinds of birds coming to the garden. We've got robins, we've got sparrows, finches, the hummingbirds, juncos, even a few doves have came visit in the garden. And we also get things like dragonflies, which show up periodically in the garden. So fantastic opportunities for photography, guys. So what could be simpler? Some bird photography in your very own backyard. So what you just seen was a clip of me setting up the camera and tripod right here, and just a few feet from where I would actually take the images. Normally I would sit just on a chair here and fire off the shutter as the birds arrive at the feeder. A hummingbird flying around now actually. But as I sat down to end the video and do the last piece to camera, my wireless microphone gave up the ghost. It's packed up and I'm no longer using it. So here we are several weeks later, just to put an end to the video. So over these past few weeks, I've actually been out a few times with the camera and managed to actually get quite a few shots of hummingbirds. Been moving the feeder around a little bit to try and get different backgrounds. You'll see that beautiful hydrangea shrub. So yesterday I actually managed to get quite a few images using the hydrangea as a background. Got some really pleasing shots. So I think what I'm going to do, guys, is just end the video here. But before I go, there's probably one other thing I could have mentioned, and that is perseverance. Perseverance. Now you would think shooting a video, taking some shots in your own backyard would be fairly simple, but I never took into account the noises in the neighbourhood. And if you stay tuned for the bloopers at the end, after the gallery, you'll see what I mean by that. But for now, guys, that's it. All that's left to say is thanks a lot for watching. Don't forget to like, share and subscribe. Cheers for now. I'll see you in the next one. You're going to love these hummingbird images. You're going to absolutely love them. Let me know what you think. So guys, it would seem that this video is actually doomed, destined to fail. When you take into consideration the original version that I accidentally deleted when I was uploading it, and that was a pretty good video, even if I do say so myself. And then, just as I went to film this clip a couple of weeks ago, the ending to this video, my wireless microphone gave up. So yeah, and then you would think that taking photographs and making video in your own backyard would be fairly straightforward, but not so much. You take into consideration your neighbours' barking dogs, screaming kids on trampolines, people with lawnmowers, torrential downpours, which we've had a lot of, even emergency vehicles going past every time I pick up the camera to do a piece to camera. So, destined to fail? Who knows? Plants and flowers. So just like I was saying, every time I go to film these hummingbirds, that's what happens.